guide your journey into Cabernet Sauvignon magnificence. Welcome to the Jock Safari Lodge in a small conservancy in the heart of the Kruger National Park, where I'm here with the cricketer Kevin Pietersen, South African born, played for England, whose focus is now very much on the environment. And this weekend, the Legacy Experience is all about conservation. People from all over the world have come together for 4 days to have a look at what's happening in the Kruger, and in particular the scourge of rhino poaching, and to see what we can do both by raising funds and awareness to bring it to an end. It's not all I'm doing though. If I've got a 5-star lodge, of course I'm going to check out the wine list. And for this weekend, the wine list is headlined by the wines of Ken Forrester, whose reserve Chenin was recently named the world's best and best on show at the Decanter World Wine Awards. So I'm going to be trying some of that Chenin Blanc and having a look at this 5-star lodge and the luxury it entails. But also this week, I'm going a little further afield. Later in the show, I'll be down in the Agulhas Triangle, where Bruce Jack and his remarkable operation that features touch points all over the winemaking world brings me into his home and tells me some of his story. But first of all, I'm down to Stellenbosch on the wine estate Tokara, where Stuart Botha is making some magic. Over the many years in which I've been coming to Stellenbosch, kicking off at university when I was dutifully avoiding classes and going wine routing instead, this Tokara has been a very regular haunter. I felt a little intimidated, to be honest, the first time I came as a much younger person, not much money, and this place just looked far too fancy and expensive for somebody like me. It still looks very fancy and expensive, but I've always felt at home because the welcome you get here is lovely, and it's just such a great place to hang out, and all the more so when you do so with a winemaker who's become a good mate as well. Stuart, lovely to see you.
Yeah, lovely to see you too. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Now, normally we sit down and we talk about wine at length.
Yeah.
We'll talk about wine a little, but I thought today would be a great opportunity to talk a little bit more about the breadth of Tokara, because although the wine is the headline act, you do so much more. Kicking off as you arrive in the car park, it's one of the few places where you pretty much park in an art gallery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a number of sculptures dotted around the estate and the property. The Ferreira family collect, and we collect a lot of sculptures and position them, and they're constantly changing throughout the season, so they get moved around a little bit. So there's always some surprise for you around another corner. And then there's art that hangs in the entrance hall, which is kind of like a gallery in itself as well. And then up at the delicatessen, we have some pieces in the garden there as well. A lot more sort of friendly, family oriented, if you will. A lot of them are even where kids can actually sit on them and get involved. So there's a lot to see, a lot to do.
It makes for a slightly laboured entrance because you keep stopping to have a look at a picture here and a painting there. But when you do go in, you notice the wine straight away, but you also notice a fair range of olive oil. That's quite a big part of the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we not only do wine, which we obviously quite well known for, but I mean, we have a significant planting of olive trees on the property, and we have our own olive press. So Gert van Dijk, he's our olive oil maker, and he makes a full range, from a premium all the way to single variety pressings, which are all sold individually. And then of course we do calamatas in jars and a little bit of balsamic as well, to complete the picture.
You're a winemaker who's won plenty of awards. Have you ever tried your hand at olive oil?
I go and I look and I dabble, but I must say it's incredibly different from winemaking. Really, the process is worlds apart, but very, very interesting. But they go from the raw material, the olives, to pressed off extra virgin olive oil in about 3 hours, whereas my role takes slightly longer, generally just over 2 years for the reds. So my cooking process is a little bit slower.
And it looks like a great deal of fun, and it is one of the many attractions. And that olive oil, as well as finding its way into homes around South Africa and beyond, also finds its way into your restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our restaurant as well as a delicatessen, so two different sites that people can frequent if they're looking for a meal. So I mean, really, when one comes to Tokara, there's so much to do. You can actually make a day of it. It's kind of a destination, you know. You can come and you can walk through the olive groves, walk through the vineyards, go for breakfast at the delicatessen, try your hand at some olive oil tasting up there with some ciabatta, perhaps buy a few, have some wines as the day goes on, come down to the tasting room, go to the restaurant for lunch. I mean, there is really just a mega amount of things to do at Tokara and keep you busy. And yeah, it's a really stunning spot. And as you can see, it's open for all to enjoy. So we love to welcome people here.
Yeah, you can spend a weekend here, let alone just a day. And
Yeah.
there's lots of activities you suggest, but you could also do what we're doing. Let's just sit here, look over the spread of the valley, and let a day drift by with a good glass of wine.
Yeah, well, often we do have weddings here, right on the spot actually, because it's a nice vista, as you've noted, and nice flat piece of lawn. So often there are weddings here, and they're run through, and they'll do the reception in the restaurant afterwards. It's just stunning. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for things to be done at Tokara, and yeah, like I said, an absolute destination.
The headline act, though, as I said, is your wine, and it's wine we're drinking now. As we look around, just give me a sense while we're in the place, and we always speak of sense of place with wine. As you look out, what, in terms of what we see, aside from being so beautiful, lends itself to allowing you as the winemaker to produce the wine that you do?
Well, I think the first and major point to note is the fact that we're sat up in the foothills of the Simonsberg mountain range. And the Simonsberg mountain range is ground zero, I would say, for some of the best and finest terroir for wine growing in South Africa, without a doubt. So we're very, very fortunate to have most of our vineyard plantings in these foothills, and all of our reserve wines, barring the Elgin, which of course comes from the Elgin property, are from this site. And it's that elevation, it's the combination of elevation. We've got beautifully deep, well-drained, decomposed granite soils, fantastic aspects in terms of the way the vineyards face. So all the way from south, where we plant our cooler, loving varieties like Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon, through to west, which is a slightly warmer site where we can plant our Cabernet Sauvignons and some of our other red Bordeaux varieties, to really get that full, long daytime sunlight into the vine. You know, the whole story of sunlight into the vine, those extra flavors, those extra intensities, and those perfectly ripe tannins. So that all comes together, but very, very much a function of the site and very much a function of the place. And yeah, that's what it's really all about for us. I mean, these are terroir-driven wines, they're site-specific wines, and the place shouts fine terroir. So we're very, very lucky in that the result is great wines.
I get the sense that you are really well settled in here. It's not been that long that you've been at Tokara, but it is very much home now. Is it still a case that, if not every day, then certainly every week, there's a new discovery, something more that you're learning about this place?
Absolutely, all the time. I mean, and that's the wonder of it, and that's the wonder of winemaking, really. It keeps you on your toes. It's never no 2 days are the same, certainly. So, I mean, there's always the opportunity to experiment and try new things as well, whether that be a fermentation vessel or a maturation cask that I choose to try something new on, like this vintage I'm trying a new Cooper, just to play with it and see the outcome. And that, of course, may or may not find its way into the finished product, and find its way and become a small little thread in a tapestry, if you will, that we're putting together. And we're constantly building on what we have and what we've experienced and experience that we have with our wines and winemaking. But of course, there's always, like I say, something new to add to that. And we want to build it into as rich and as complex a product as we can. But again, always mindful of the fact that we want to showcase the terroir and where these grapes are grown and where the fruit comes from. If we can make wines that become sort of a looking glass or an insight into the place and consistently do that year to year. That's how I think you build true recognizable and recognized and recognition for wines with lasting sort of pedigree.
Speaking of lasting pedigree, we are going to try a wine before we head off to enjoy the rest of our day. And it's a wine that recently Wine Magazine gave an astonishing 95 points to for a 10-year-old white wine. The fact that white wine is still going after 10 years will be a surprise to some. The fact that it's got 95 points will be a surprise to many, but it's clearly something rather special.
Oops. Yeah, so I mean, this is our Director's Reserve White 2018. The 10-year-old, obviously, what was that, the 2012, I think, that they tasted. And certainly, I mean, wines made in this style, I mean, it's made in an incredibly classic style. It's a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon, all from this property, from the same sites every year. And what you find is wines made in this style, it's classic, it's done with the barrel fermentation. That builds an immense amount of sort of ageability into the wine. I work quite oxidatively with the fruit right up front or the juice right up front. And once you get it into barrel and then you mature in barrel on the lees for sort of 8 to 9 months, that wine is absolutely rock solid. And in the most part, I mean, we're drinking the 2018 now. That's current vintage for us. You actually need to age that wine to really, truly start to see the beauty of it. Drunk too young, they can often be a little bit shy. But here, you know, 4 years down the drag, we're actually coming really into that perfect drinking window. And if we're 4 years down the drag in the perfect drinking window, you get just more complexity and more interest coming through in the wine as they age. So 10 years, it's nice to get a 95 points, of course, but 10 years down the drag it's impressive.
Well, cheers to that.
Cheers, thank you.
Cheers to a great wine. Mm.
Oh, that is singing.
Oh, and it seems so simple. We'll throw some Sauvignon Blanc in, we'll throw some Semillon, and bang, we've got a wine. I know it's a little bit more complicated than that, but the result is an utter delight. Mm. And I suppose, in closing, it almost has to be this good, really, because when you're at a place where the wine's got to compete with the olive oil and the restaurant and the art and the delicatessen and the views and the gardens, you've got your work cut out to make sure that the wine stays top dog.
Well, you know, I have fun doing it, and that's really what it's all about. And as long as you're having fun, I think the product, given the background and where the grapes come from and the facilities that we have here and the people that we have here, it makes it quite easy to do this.
I can never tire of visiting Tokara. It's generally considered to be red wine territory, that part of Stellenbosch, but as we've seen from Stuart, some fabulous white wine coming out of the estate as well. We've had a fair bit of white wine over the last few days here at Jock, not just Ken's award-winning Chenin Blanc, he's also got a rather good Sauvignon Blanc amongst the many wines we've been sampling in the company of Kevin Pietersen. I still remember the first time I had wine with Kevin. It was very early on in his wine journey, where differentiating between red and white was kind of his level of expertise. He's become a bit of an aficionado now, loves his wine and collects it, and he's had plenty to drink here at Jock, which is really well situated, not just in terms of being next to what is at the moment a dry riverbed, but in the middle of rainy season can become a torrential flood of a river. It's also about 45 minutes from Skakusa Airport, maybe a bit longer if you spot some game on the way, which is pretty likely. And then once you get here, you've got these fabulous rooms. There's a real old school feel to them, lots of space, very open, very airy, that time stands still feel, which you love when you get away to the bush and spend some time on safari. As the name suggests, Jock of the Bushveld, Percy Fitzpatrick. It's a very strong theme that runs as a thread through this entire property. A property that was the very first private game lodge ever opened in the Kruger National Park. So rich sense of history. There's also a bit of history in the Agulhas Wine Triangle, perhaps not quite as long as this, but Bruce Jack has set up home there, and that's where he's making some of his wine. There's also wine all over the world. So we caught up with Bruce at home, The Drift, his farm in the middle of nowhere. And as you head off to find out what The Drift is all about and catch up on the Bruce Jack story, I'm going to be slipping into a bathtub and whiling away the rest of the afternoon with a glass of bubbles. I'll let you picture that. Special treat. A little earlier this year, we had a great deal of fun while I was in Belfast in Northern Ireland, filming a show centred around South African wine that had made its way onto the shelves of Tesco. A lot of the wines are not ones you can find here in South Africa, or if you can, in very limited numbers, but you can certainly find plenty of Bruce Jack. And you might be thinking, kind of like a Ken Forrester, does this person really exist? Well, he certainly does, and he's one of South African wine's great entrepreneurs, great adventurers, great characters, and he has a home out in the middle of nowhere. Bruce Jack, welcome to the show.
It's a great privilege. I've whenever I mention the same sentence as Ken Forrester, I immediately get nervous. Being somebody who I'm significantly less successful or as important. So, but thank you for putting me in the right realm. I really appreciate that.
Well, you're much younger, so you've got a long way to get there. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. And yet, despite being significantly younger, in fact, I'm rather worried you're even younger than I am. You have got this this amazing wine journey behind you. You've done so much in a relatively short space of time. In as much as it's possible, because I know you weave a great story, give us the annotated version of the Bruce Jack wine story.
The wine journey, my grandmother was Scottish. She liked to buy her whiskey at staff prices. So as a young teenager, it was suggested to me that it would suit my development if I worked in the local bottle store. I fell in love as a result through the eyes of the consumer, through the retailer, really. And being in that thing and seeing how people react to wines as a youngster, not really understanding it all. Although, I mean, my father was the third member of the Wine of the Month Club. And so we grew up with wine in the house, and he had traveled widely, as had my mom. So wine was part of everyday life. And I remember on Sunday braais getting half red wine, half soda water with a spoon of sugar. That was my treat as a youngster, because that's how my dad had seen it being done in Italy. And so wine has always been something that has intrigued me because of how consumers view it, how consumers see it, how consumers interact with it. So I don't have this highfalutin kind of guy on the top of a hill trying to make the world's greatest Mona Lisa wine. It's more about something that's part of everyday life. And I take my lessons and my leanings from people who make really good value for money wine. And I know it's a bit of a swear word in South Africa because we're trying to premiumize everything. And I think that's the right thing to do. But at the same time, if one goes to the Rhone and you drink something like a Jamais, for example, which is, consistently unbelievable great value for money over generations, and their philosophy is they're not going to make a wine that they can't afford themselves. And I am a farmer, and this farm is not my farm. It belongs to various financial institutions and myself. So you have to make things that make sense for yourself, and you have to be authentic. And as you are, and with your Irish and Zimbabwean roots, that's where authenticity was born. So that's the kind of thing that we try and do.
In your journey to get here to the Drift, this wonderful farm we're sitting on today, you've stopped off at various points. Tell us about some of those highlights making wine in different parts of South Africa.
Well, not just South Africa. I've been very fortunate. So timing is everything. I think it was Rockefeller who said anyone who says that they are responsible for their own success haven't taken into account the fact that luck is looking back at them in the mirror. And I've just been very, very lucky. I've been at the right place at the right time. Hugely fortunate. I don't think it's really anything special about what I do. I happen to have learned a couple of lessons along the way. One of them is a great team, and the other one is collaboration. If you can collaborate with great people, like-minded people, and if you can attract around you really good team members, then you're able to create something special. And this is an industry which I think I've learned as I've traveled around making wine in Australia and Spain and Chile, in America, that we just sort of, because you really are dealing with small margins, and because you're dealing with the vagaries of the weather, it attracts people who are into it for the spiritual reward of work over and above the financial reward. And I think there is something kind of very wholesome about that. And so people that are in the wine industry generally are very generous of spirits and very wholesome. So I think, the things that I've learned are really philosophical rather than technical.
We've spent the last several hours with a number of your colleagues from the Agulhas area, and they have basically been telling you how good your wine is for the last few hours, because you've pulled out a series of bottles from over the last 15 years. And these are wines that in the eyes of your peers stand out as exceptional. And yet not one of those wines is at the kind of price where you need to go and negotiate an organ transplant to put down a deposit on it. And that has been very much at the core of Bruce Jack Wine. You've alluded to it already, producing great wine at great value. How are you able to do that, first of all? And secondly, has there not been the temptation to at least one or two wines, stick them up there at the top level and say, hey, I'm Bruce Jack, I've been all over the world, I've done amazing stuff. I can demand 1,000 rand a bottle.
I don't think anyone should price a wine more than they're prepared to pay for it. It's about authenticity, it's about integrity, and at the end of the day, it's a staple. It has been rarefied and made into perhaps something that it isn't by all sorts of different reasons. All we want to do is leave a legacy of great integrity and great wine at great value at every price point.
Well, let's look at a great wine at a great price point. And you've chosen the movable feast. Tell me why, and then tell me what we're drinking.
The mistake I always make, Dan, is that I want to show other people's wine because I love collaboration. I think that's one of the things this wine industry is really good at, or this industry is really good at. But I know that if I didn't show the wine that pays the school fees and buys the diesel for the tractors on the farm, my wife will literally kill me. So I have to kind of try and dig the ego up and put it on display. So this is, Movable Feast. Obviously, being an English scholar yourself, you'll know where that comes from. It's a title of Ernest Hemingway's autobiography of his years in France and Spain when he was in his early 20s. I love the book. Obviously, a great fan of Hemingway. I've read everything he's written, but I've also read most of what's been written about him. And there's an interesting book I must tell you about called Mrs. Hemingway, which is all is written by a wonderful new young writer in the UK called Naomi Wood.
I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
And it's about the perspective of Hemingway through his wife's eyes. Fantastic. So this is it's called Movable Feast. Was the blend changes slightly every year, depending on what's really good in barrel. It's 100% fruit from the farm. This is a farm at 520 meters above sea level, so we have altitude, which is unusual to be so close to the sea. I think we're probably the highest wine farm in the Western Cape, so close to the sea. That means that the environment's very different. It's nice and blowy. We don't have to spray so much because we got a lot of wind. And but the thing is that it makes these really wonderful wines that can't be made anywhere else. And love them or hate them, they are different. And I think that's for me. There's a herbaceousness, a crunchy red fruit, which is born of altitude. There's a wonderful drinkability in it. There's soft tannins, but at the same time, there's like real presence. There's character.
There's character to it, yeah.
And I think, again, luck. Just hugely lucky and fortunate to be and able to make a wine from this area.
You bear the hallmark of so many of our winemakers, which is playing down quite aggressively the degree to which you're actually responsible for a wonderful product, and which is a delight to be able to share with you. There we go. A splendid afternoon down in, I don't actually know where we are. We got lost 7 times getting here, but we found our way through, and I'm very glad we did, because in Bruce Jack and in his wines, we've got yet another terrific part of this wonderful and never-ending South African wine story. It's the sense of adventure to the Bruce Jack wine story that I think appeals to me the most. He's just had so much fun all over the world, and it really has been this constant adventure. And it's an adventure that you'll have to go on if you want to go and find him off the beaten track in the Agulhas Triangle. But if you're heading down to Cape Agulhas and that southernmost tip of Africa, then try and stop off at Bruce and lose yourself in both his story and his wine. And together they make for a rather appealing combination. So too does the combination of raising money for conservation and doing so in such beautiful surrounds here at the Jock Safari Lodge. And we've had a cracking few days. We've had auctions and dinners in the evening, raised a lot of money for the Legacy Experience Foundation. We've been out on game drives, we've played golf at Leopard Creek, and we've had the chance to go up, dart rhino and dehorn them. It's an unsettling process to watch that horn come off. It doesn't feel natural, but unfortunately, given the nature of rhino poaching at the moment, there isn't really another feasible option to try and do our best to keep these great creatures alive and ensure that my children and my children's children are seeing them for years to come. So to Kevin Pietersen and his team, Derek, the Bergsma brothers, Hilgen van Breda, thank you for what's been not just a lovely few days and a great experience and the chance to drink some really good wine with some great people, but also to support a wonderful charity, a wonderful foundation, and what's really a movement in terms of the broader conservation vision. If you'd like to know more, jump online, have a look at the Legacy Experience. I think you'll be pretty impressed by what a small number of people have done already and are set to do in the future. And so I'll raise a toast to them. Ken Forrester supplied us with lovely wine, not just white, his Renegade Red amongst some great red wines he produces, but this is the one that got the Decanter Award, the best on show, the best Chenin Blanc in the world, the reserve that Ken makes. He is the godfather of Chenin Blanc, so no real surprise, and a wonderful glass with which to celebrate. So to everyone who's been part of it, cheers. You've been watching Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay, coming to you from Jock Safari Lodge in the Kruger National Park, along with some really good Chenin Blanc. Cheers.